We're going to speak in this session about the very powerful attack that Satan has upon our churches, actually upon individuals, and upon the home and the family. It's interesting to me. Now, we all know, and there are many pastors here, you know the attack that Satan has on your church. And when I say an attack upon the church, I'm talking about a good church, one that preaches the gospel, people get saved, that's what it's all about. Well, of course, Satan hates that kind of church. He hates that kind of church, and he wants to destroy that kind of church. But the main part of this really is about the home and the family, because what makes up our churches? It's families. And, of course, those are individuals also. That's why I say the attack, this assault actually from Satan, is upon the church. It's upon individuals also in the church. And it certainly is upon our homes and families. I believe he has his guns actually trained right on the church and right on the home. But I think especially the home and the family. The most important thing all of us have in a home, the most important commodity in that home, would be our children. If we have children, and some of you do, and maybe many of you do. And the devil is after those children. He wants to destroy them. And the Bible describes this attack as the wiles of the devil. And I call it an assault, and it is an assault from Satan. We're assaulted every day, all of us are, because the Bible says he walks around, that is, the devil walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And I've read that verse many, many times. I thought, man, whom he may devour. Well, who's the whom? Well, it's all of us who are saved. He's not bothering people who are in the gutter. He's already got them there. Now, if you came out of the gutter, by the way, if you got saved out of the gutter, you know what I'm talking about. Satan's already got those people. The people who are on drugs and alcohol and broken marriages and so on and so forth. The devil's already got them exactly where he wants them. So he's after you, and he's after me. And the more we step out for the Lord, I believe the more powerful that attack comes on our life. Now, I want us to look at it in the Bible. If you turn to, you're familiar with the passage, Ephesians 6. And we're going to read some verses here. Then we're going to get some explanations of some of the sentences, some of the words, some of the phrases here that are used. But if you look at verse 10, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God. And I really do believe this is the key here to victory. And that is putting on the armor of God. And that's described starting in about verse 14 and going on down to at least 18 or 19, including prayer, by the way, the importance of prayer. So it talks about the armor of God here, but notice the reason. Put on the armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. We need to stand. It even uses the word withstand in verse 13. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And we are in this evil day. It's always been evil. The Satans have been around from the beginning. And so it's always been evil. We have the sinful nature we're all born with. It's always been evil. But there's no doubt in my mind, it's so much more public today. Everything that is evil, and it's called good. I can give many examples, but you know what I'm talking about. There's so many things that it's very obvious, if you read the Bible at all, he describes what is evil. But today, man wants to call it, it's okay, it's good, we accept it, and they want us to accept everything today. But that's not God, is it? And that's not the Bible. But I want you to notice in verse 12, because here's the attack. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. In fact, if that was our problem, we could probably deal with it much better. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Think about it. Your enemy, the greatest enemy we have cannot be seen, cannot be touched, cannot be handled physically. I hear people saying, you've heard this, well, I'll tell you one thing, I'm going to punch the devil in the eye. No, you're not. You're not going to take a gun and shoot him either. You can't see him. And it's called the wiles of the devil, his very powerful attack. And then it goes on here. But our enemy in the attack comes in the principalities against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So let's look at a few of those phrases and words. For instance, the words wiles, you might want to write this down. The word wiles, it's actually Satan's methodical, vile methods of attack. That's what that's describing. His very vile and evil, and we should add powerful. It all comes out of the darkness. It comes out of the spirit world, doesn't it? But even though it comes out of the spirit world, what does it come into? Well, it comes into both our worlds, the physical world and the spiritual world. This is a very powerful spiritual warfare that we're in. And then you take the words evil works. It talks in this verse about evil works. That's practiced by evil people in darkness. See, it all comes out of the darkness because that's where sin is. It's in the darkness. And Satan is in the darkness. But he attacks us in our spiritual life. And then the phrase spiritual wickedness. That's man with his sinful propensities or tendencies ruling us. And that can happen even to a Christian, because even though we're saved, you know, when we get saved, we don't lose our sinful nature. It's still there. Now, thank God we have a new nature, don't we, when we're saved? Christ in us now, the hope of glory, wonderful. We have a new nature, but we still have this sinful nature. It doesn't go away. It won't go away until we're in heaven. We're with the Lord, and then that'll be all over. But until that time, as long as we live in a human body on this earth, we've got a problem. Our sinful nature is still there. That's why we can't afford to yield. The problem is not the temptation. I'll tell you that right now. The problem is when we yield to temptation. Because once we yield to temptation, this is according to James chapter 1 actually, verse 15, then we're locked into a sin. Then sin, when it's finished, brings forth death. Now we all know that. That's why people are going to die. How many times have you told a person that? You know why you're going to die? It's because of sin. If there were no sin, you wouldn't have to worry about dying. But what about this phrase? When it is finished? Have you ever thought about that phrase? When it is finished. When what's finished? Sin. When sin drags a person through the filth of this world and dirties their mind and even ruins their life, in some cases destroys their life. When it is finished. I'll tell you, none of us can afford to have sin in our life because it is a destroyer. And that's what Satan's trying to do. Now, he's trying to do several things. See, I believe Satan has a plan. And he's had a plan for years. And he's working this plan. And there's several things he's trying to get people to do who are saved. I'm talking about people who are saved. Or at least they come from a Christian home where at least one or both parents are saved. First thing he's trying to do, he's trying to get people to rarely go to church or never go to church. And you know, as a pastor, this is an unbelievable struggle. People get saved, they get in all the way, they really start to grow, and all of a sudden, they start missing. I believe that's all a plan of Satan. He puts that thought in a person's mind. Well, you can just miss this Sunday. Well, you don't have to worry about this. Well, listen, you're going somewhere. Don't worry about going to church. And he puts that seed in a person's mind. And pretty soon they start dropping out. Pretty soon they're out of church completely. Here's the second thing Satan's trying to do. He's trying to get Christians to ignore the Bible. It's one of his favorite tricks. Now, he doesn't mind us having a Bible in our home. But if a Bible just sits in the home, that's not enough for a Christian. See, our Bible shouldn't be collecting dust unless you got, like I think I have about 15 Bibles. I've been given Bibles over the years. And some of them I use and some of them I don't even use. They're still in the box. And but listen, you ought to have a Bible that you use, shouldn't you? I mean, that's right, all of us should. But this is part of Satan's attack. He doesn't want people to get in that Bible. He wants us to ignore the Bible. Because if we ignore the Bible, then we give him an open door to our life. So that's part of his plan. Here's another part. Constant fighting between moms and dads. That's his plan. His ultimate plan is not to just get those moms and dads fighting with each other, I'm talking about, but eventually to split them up. This is part of Satan's plan. He doesn't want married couples who are saved to stay together. He wants to split them up. Here's another plan. Heavy fighting, and sometimes nasty fighting, between siblings. Now all siblings fight, I understand that. But I'm talking about real heavy, nasty fighting that goes on between siblings. That's a plan of Satan. Now, what is he trying to do with that? With all these things, he's trying to divide the home. Because Jesus made this clear in his earthly ministry. He said, a house divided itself against itself cannot stand. The devil knows that. So if he can split a couple up, and I'm talking about Christian people, he will do it. It's part of his plan. He doesn't want you to get along with your wife. He doesn't want me to get along with my wife. He wants to put a block between us. He wants to ruin our marriage. And one of the main reasons why, especially if we have children, he's after those children. He doesn't want one child to remain pure and decent and right. He doesn't want one child to end up as an adult marrying someone pure, right, and decent. He doesn't want them to go on in their life and live good Christian lives, especially someone who will bear testimony of their Savior. He hates that. And so he's after our children. He wants to destroy them. And if he can get children, here's another thing, an area is disobedience. That's part of his plan, to get young people to be disobedient and dishonoring the parents. And we know today there's so much of that. There always has been. But man, there's so much of that today. And Satan does not want any of us to know what it is to have a child. Now, all children have problems, and they all hit a time of rebellion and so forth. But the devil's plan is to get those young people just to really hate their parents. And I've had them tell me that, boy. I had a girl one day sit in my office, and this is not a boy, this is a girl, and she takes her fist, and she slams it on my desk. She's sitting across my desk. And she says these words to me, I hate my parents. Hey, she raises her, and by the way, her dad was a pastor. Raises her fist again. I hate my parents. And of course, I've told young people this over the years, and I'll say it again today. Young people can't rebel against their parents and get away with it. It'll take a toll on them. As the Bible says, it won't be well with you. And it won't be. But this is part of Satan's plan. Rebellion in the home is another one. And when I say rebellion, I'm not just talking about the young people. Sometimes mom and dad rebel. All rebellion, ultimately, even if you're rebelling against a spouse, rebelling against someone else, really all rebellion goes back to God. It goes back to being rebellious against God. And there's a good reason for that, by the way. Even though we're saved, the Bible describes the heart in a horrible way. It's deceitful above all things, desperately wicked. And who can know it? Who can understand the human heart, the heart of man, the real person inside? Well, you can't. This is part of his plan. Then another part is to be bitter, get bitterness rather in the hearts of everyone in the home. Let bitterness reign. And it's happening today over and over and over again. And then to make sure that there's some immoral living prevailing in someone's life in that home. It's not just, this doesn't just happen to young people, this happens to parents. How many parents have you known? Maybe you know somebody right now, just totally went off track. Used to love the Lord, used to live for the Lord, now they're living an immoral life. How did that happen? Some of them are even living a life of perversion. How'd that happen? How does that happen to somebody who's saved, number one? How does that happen to somebody who's saved in the ministry? But it happens. It's because it's all Satan's plan. Here's the last thing. To weaken and possibly to destroy the home. Because that is the ultimate goal. Satan wants to destroy the family, destroy the home, because if he can do that, he can get the church. He can destroy the church. And you know this as a pastor. I know you know this. He hates you. He hates any person that gets up in a pulpit and preaches the gospel of Christ. And you know this every Sunday, every Wednesday, every time you get up to preach and teach. Satan's attacking you. And he doesn't want you to give that message because he does not want the gospel to go forth. So if he can get the home and the family, brother, he's got something. So if this is all true, then what gives Satan an open door to our homes? What provides him an open door to get into our home or get into our individual life and destroy your testimony for Jesus Christ? Now, he can't take your soul, but I'll tell you, he can destroy your testimony. He can hurt you in a large way. So we want to look at some things that open that door. Here's one. When there's a lack of a righteous example in the home. When I say a righteous example, I'm talking about biblically. I'm not talking about self-righteousness. I'm talking about biblical righteousness. And when we talk about an example, we're talking about a biblical example. There are really two things as a Christian we all should be. We should be an example and we should be a testimony. If we're saved, we need to be a testimony. Now, who do we testify to? Well, we're to be a testimony to lost people. They're all around us. And we ought to be a testimony to them. The example is to the believers. And we have an obligation, all of us do, responsibility, and especially if we have children, to be an example in that home. Now, let me show it to you in the Bible. Turn to the book of Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 4. Now, you're probably familiar with the passage here. 1 Timothy chapter 4. And in 1 Timothy chapter 4, now, when Paul wrote this, he's especially singling out here Timothy, a very young guy in the Lord and in the ministry. And so he says, as he starts this out, he said, don't let anybody despise thy youth. Well, first thing that would tell me, it doesn't matter what a person's age is. Don't let somebody tell you that you can't be a testimony for the Lord. Don't let somebody tell you you can't be an example to believers. And then he goes on. He says, but be thou an example of the believers. Then he names these very important areas to be an example in. Now, you think about this for all of us, our own self. First of all, he says, be an example in word. Now, that actually is talking about our words that we speak. You know, words are very powerful. You know that? Words can be very powerful, and words can either help or hurt. And so often our words hurt somebody. See, that's why as parents, and even as adults to young people, we shouldn't talk to our kids. And I was kind of raised this way. My dad actually talked to me this way. Hey, stupid, don't you know how to listen? Man, there's a lot of parents who use those phrases. Hey, dummy, wake up. Don't you know how to listen? Those are words. And they're horrible words. And they're powerful words. Words should lift people up. Those words don't lift anybody up. They put people down. And they hurt like a fist. Like somebody taking their fist and punching you right in the face. Well, you can't be my kid. Boy, that's horrible. And yet there are parents that use those phrases. Words are very powerful. And you know, most words are not said to a wall, are they? Some are, but not most words. Most words are said to another human being. And think about this, most of our words are said to the people we will live with. If you're a young person, to your siblings, to your parents. If you're parents, to your spouse, to your children. That's where we say most of our words. And the Bible makes this clear here. We're to be an example in our words, how we speak to one another. Then the next word here is conversation. That actually is not talking about words here. In the Greek, this word conversation actually means our behavior or the kind of lifestyle that we have. Now, none of us can get saved and then live a perfect life. But you know what? I believe we can live right. I believe we can live decent. And I believe that we can follow the Bible, the precepts of the Bible, by applying them. And this is a mistake that many Christians make. How many pastors have done this? And you're probably going to identify with this as a pastor. How many pastors have counseled a married couple? Took his Bible, which he would, showed him in the Bible what they ought to be doing, and they come back maybe months later and said, you know what? That didn't work. Well, the reason it didn't work is they didn't apply the Bible principles. You can't just hear the Bible. Oh, you say, yeah, that's right. That sounds decent. We have to apply the principles from the Bible. And when they don't apply the principles, they get all messed up. It's part of Satan's plan. And he's very powerful in doing this. And listen, it's important, folks. It is important when we get saved to live right and to live a decent life. I believe it's important to dress right. That's why at Daytona, and this, you know, I'm not foolish, I'm not stupid. I've been doing this 53 years. There are people that don't agree with me about going to Daytona. Well, several things about that. Because I've been asked, well, how can you take young people to Daytona and expose them to the beach? I'll tell you how. We go there, number one, fully clothed. We started that from the very beginning, fully clothed. And here we are 53 years later, still fully clothed. It's not the same clothes, not the same people, but I believe it's a standard that God has blessed and honored. And you can spot our young people and our adults a mile away because they all have their clothes on and they have a Bible in their hand. And they're not there to gawk and to look around. They're there to witness. And I'll tell you, it's an amazing thing how God will take young people and use them in that way. It's a very powerful, powerful thing. Let me tell you about a young girl. Well, I'm going to tell you later because I'm going to tell you on the second point. I don't want to say it now. But this lifestyle is important, that we live the kind of lifestyle that we ought to live. It's important. The world will tell you it's not important. Certain Christians will say, hey, it's not important how you dress or you undress. Do you know these kids that come to Daytona? I believe God puts blinders over their eyes. I really do. For all of us, not just for the young people, all of us who come there. I believe God has given that to us over the years. And I tell people this because they'll say, well, how can you take them there to those beaches and expose them to all that nudity? Well, Do you know that your boy or girl could go in a mall and see just as much as they see at Daytona today, especially the day we live in? Or walking down the street. See, when we're there, we got like a huge spotlight on us. You're not standing around out there gawking. Because if you think people aren't watching, they're not looking, I couldn't tell you the people that have said to our kids, like this one group of boys. Now, these are guys. In fact, I believe they're football players. Because many of them, there are football players from the biggest colleges in the country. And these guys said to this girl, you know, I'm going to tell you something. I don't agree with what you're saying, but I have a huge amount of respect for you. And it's really kind of refreshing to see a girl out here with her dress on. Now, that's some unsaved guy saying that. And I believe it's important because people are watching and people are looking. And it is important. People will say, well, it's not important. You know, it doesn't matter how you dress. It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what kind of music you listen. Yes, it does. That all matters. It's called influence. And people need to be influenced in the right way. So the Bible warns here about making sure you're an example in your lifestyle, in your behavior, how you live. And then look at the word charity here. And of course, that's love. And that's agape love, sacrificial love. That's what that's describing. We're to live an example of the love of Christ. And then in spirit, that's our attitude, isn't it? The spirit that we have. Boy, it's important that we have the right kind of spirit. We can so easily get the wrong kind of spirit. How would you like if I got up here and said, no, I'll tell you something, I'm going to tell you things about the Bible. Well, that's a horrible spirit. You don't want to hear somebody talk like that. Now, you may not want to hear me talk, but you'd rather hear me talk than have somebody like that talk. We don't want that kind of spirit. We don't need that kind of a spirit. We are to be an example to our children and to our spouse, by the way, of the right kind of spirit. Because people struggle with this. You know, people talk about the struggle of young people with their attitudes. Well, how many parents have said this to their child? You got a bad attitude. Have you ever thought the way that was said? That wasn't said with a good attitude. The truth is, we all struggle with our spirit. We all struggle with our attitude. And God wants us to be an example in our attitude, in our spirit. And then there's the word faith. We're not just saved by faith. We're supposed to live by faith. That's how we're supposed to live every day. I really believe many Baptists who claim to be saved, if they are saved, they're living by their feelings. It's the worst thing a person can live by, especially a saved person, because your feelings change constantly. That's why when some Christian gets up on Sunday morning, if they're following their feelings, I don't feel good today. And this is what I call it, the Baptist headache. They get that headache about 8:30 in the morning. I got a headache. Don't think I can go to church today. What time is it? 10:30? Oh, I feel pretty good right now. That's a Baptist headache. It comes and goes, very quickly. But if you're living by feeling, the feelings will let us down every time. We're supposed to live by faith. And we're supposed to give the example to our children and to our spouse and to our friends. And if you're a minister, to anyone we minister with, we need to be an example in faith. And then it talks about purity. And I believe that's talking about two kinds of purity. Purity in the mind, purity in the actions. If a person's mind is not right, then their actions won't be right. That's why the devil does not attack your actions. He attacks your mind. It is a very powerful attack upon the mind. He doesn't want any of us to live a pure life, to give that example to our children. Why? Well, he wants to ruin young people. He wants to ruin their lives. And I'm telling you, he's having a heyday today. And you know this is true. How many children grow up in a good Christian home? It's by the hundreds. It was even when I was a youth director. This was going on back then. How many kids grow up in a Christian home, taught all the things from the Bible, go to a Christian school, many of them. Many of them go to a Christian school. And they think somehow, some way, that's going to do it. And how many of them, when they get older especially, hitting that brink of the teenage years and then on into the teenage years, that rebellion comes so strongly. It happens to hundreds of them. It's a sad thing. And they certainly need our example in purity. They may not follow it, but they need it. We can't be perfect, but we can strive to be an example. And I believe there are several marks that mark a person who is a poor example. Here's one. The first one is inconsistent Christian living. I didn't say inconsistent living. I said inconsistent Christian living. What do we tell our children? What do we teach our young people? Well, this is what we teach them. Do right. Live for the Lord. Hey, in fact, give your life to Christ right now while you're young. Don't waste your years. Don't let the years fly by and they're all gone. Do it now. Do it while you're young. But really, who should that start with? It should start with all of us. With Daddy as the example. That's why I say when there's a poor example in the home, it opens the door very wide for Satan to get in and even destroy that home. We as men play such an important role in the home and the family, but not just the home and the family, the church. To me, there's just something about, it's not that I don't love to hear women sing. I mean, I love to hear women sing, but I'd rather hear men sing. I'd rather hear a man sing any day. It's just me, maybe because I'm a man, I don't know. And I love to hear men sing. Just singing in, with the whole audience singing, it's great to hear that. All these men's voices. Well, the devil hates that. He doesn't want men to sing about the Lord. He doesn't want men to stand for Jesus Christ. He wants to make them wimpy, and that's what they're trying to do in our society today. It's a horrible thing. They're trying to destroy manhood. I don't know about you, but I don't like that. I have no desires to be a woman. None. I don't want to whatever they call it. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to go in the bathroom with one either. Amen. That's why I don't get them Target bathrooms. But it's going on. Here's the second one. When a parent, especially a parent, has a critical spirit, that's a second mark of a very poor example, a critical spirit. And I've said so often how many children have grown up across this country year after year after year in a Christian home, hearing a mom or a dad or both sitting at a table and using their words, by the way, to run down the preacher, maybe their own pastor, talk about spiritual things in a negative way. And here's what we don't understand. Those little ears hear that. And they go down in their heart. And I will guarantee you, any parent, it won't take a toll on them when they're a little child. It's when they hit the teenage years. And this is where many parents will throw up their hands. I don't understand it. I've had them in church all their life. I don't understand it. I sent them to a Christian school. Well, I'll tell you something. I believe the home can be an unbelievable, powerful influence upon our children. But the responsibility of the home goes back to mom and dad. And we're to be an example. And if we have a critical spirit, we're going to pass that critical spirit on to our children. It's a horrible thing. Here's the third mark, and that is not spending quality time with them. And spending quality time with your family, you don't have to have a lot of money. Did you know that? You know what I used to do? When we were raising our two boys, we have two sons, when they were little, I would ask my wife every Tuesday. It was my day off on Tuesday. I was a youth director back then in Trinity Baptist Church, Jacksonville, Florida. And I would go to my family. I'd say, now, Nancy, what do you want to do today? It was the same thing every Tuesday. Go to the mall. So we would go to the mall, and of course I would take the leash. No, I'm just kidding about that. To keep her out of the stores, no. And I'd ask my boys, where you want to go? Well, duck pond. For some reason, they love ducks. And I literally hate ducks. I can't stand ducks, and I'll tell you why. I'd take them to this duck pond. We'd have a sack full of bread. Boy, I was there the first time feeding the ducks, and I don't know if you've ever been how many have been to a duck pond? Have you ever noticed that there's a head duck there? There's a head duck. And here's this head duck, great big white duck, big red thing hanging over its bill. You know how women flip their hair? Well, he'd flip his, whatever that thing is, flip it over and over again. And he was the head duck. And when I'd throw the bread over here, he with his wings, he'd knock all the little ones out of the way. Go over and get the bread. He ate most of the bread. And boy, I determined next time he's not getting a drop of that bread. I'll fake him out this time. I had a bundle of bread the next time I came, and I'd go like this. Here you go. And I'd fake it. I wouldn't throw it. He'd knock all the little ones out of the way. Go over there and eat. I'd feed the little ones right there. Yeah, that's great. Boy, he got so mad. Have you ever heard a duck curse? There's such a thing as duck cursing. They're quack, 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 blankety blank. I heard it right in there. Man, he was so angry. He was so mad. And finally, when the bread was gone, he didn't get a bit. That was the plan. He wasn't going to get any. And I thought I had the victory, boy. And I said, let's go. And I turned around, one son on one side, one son on the other, my wife on the other side, my other son, started walking away. And all of a sudden, I heard this head duck coming up out of the water. Quack, 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 blankety blank. It was again. I heard it again. And all of a sudden, I felt him on my backside right here. He clamped on to my fanny. And I mean, he would not let go. I twisted around. Of course, my boys were laughing. You know, they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't want to tell them, but I was almost crying. It hurt. It hurt bad. So, you know, ever since then, I've hated ducks. But I tell you what I did every Tuesday. We went to the duck pond even after that. Even after getting bit by that duck. Now, you know, they don't have teeth. You know that? They don't need teeth. That's a powerful bill they got, brother. You don't have to have a lot of money to spend time with kids. We got to do it. Here's the second thing that opens the door, and that is the presence of a rebel. Now, rebellion can, I already said this, can not just be in the heart of a young person. It can be in the heart of a parent also. But the Lord here, it's an interesting thing in Ephesians 6 here. If you start up at the first verse, the very thing out of the box is not two parents. You go to verse 4 for that. The first thing out of the box is the Lord telling the children. Children, obey the Lord, or obey your parents in the Lord. For this is right. And you know, if there were no other reason for obedience, that's a good enough one right there. Because the Bible says it's right for young people to line up with the home, with the chain of command. And the chain of command is not God, children, parents. It's God, parents, children. Young people, children can't go around their parents and play like everything is all right with the Lord when it's not all right between mom and dad as far as on their part is concerned. Yet I've seen a lot of young people do this. The Bible's very clear about this, and yet there are so many young people rebelling against the home, kicking against the home. In not just a little rebellion, some of them in great rebellion, because they allowed that rebellion to fester. Maybe it started when they were 12 or 13, but they kept their heart that way, and the rebellion gets worse and worse. And all of a sudden, they're in this unbelievable defiant rebellion against mom and dad. And the Bible does make this clear here. He gives this not just obedience, but honor. Because I believe this. I believe in the life of a young person, obedience and honor go hand in hand. Just like, by the way, love and discipline for us as parents go hand in hand. We're not just, now I believe in disciplining. our children. We're supposed to discipline them. The Bible's full of those verses. But I believe that discipline is to be coupled with love. Well, it's the same with obedience. If a young person obeys their parents, that means they give honor to them. And there's just not a lot of young people giving honor to their parents today. It's a horrible thing. And some of these homes are very good Christian homes. And yet the young person is in rebellion. And to me, there's nothing worse than a broken-hearted mom or dad. Man, I've knelt down with many of them to kneel down and pray with them. Broken-hearted over the rebel that's in their home. That's actually hurting their home. Maybe even hindering their marriage. Possibly even destroying their home. God doesn't take rebellion lightly. In fact, he couples it up with the sin of witchcraft. That's how serious it is to dishonor your mom and dad and dishonor your parents. You know, my parents were never saved, as far as I know to this day. And I could tell you some stories there also, how each one of them died. But as far as I know, they weren't saved. But you know, even after I got saved, I still gave honor to my mom and dad. There's just something important about that. And yet we've got young people right in the midst of their home not giving honor to mom and dad. And they need honor. And they need obedience. I describe that rebellion in two ways. Outward rebellion, inward rebellion. What's the outward rebellion? Well, you tell Junior, and I'm going to pick on Junior. Now, Junior, and by the way, it could be Juniorette, but I'm going to say, Junior, you take out the garbage. And when you get out there and take the garbage out, I want you to cut the yard. Now, this is an outward rebel. No, I'm not going to do it. Well, you know, if you got one like that, you don't have to scratch your head and say, I wonder if they're rebellious. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? I don't think that's the one that bothers me the most. It's the one that has the inward rebellion. And that rebellion is so strong inside them, but it hasn't come out yet. That's the one where mom tells Junior or Juniorette, now I want you to get in your room and clean your room up. It's been about 5 years. And I'm not exaggerating, I don't think. Get in there and clean that room up, make the bed. So they go behind the door. And before they go behind the door, they're always careful to say, Mom, here I go. I'm going to clean my room. Look at Super Brown right now. Boy, I'm going to clean my room. Keep your eye on me. Tell Dad, by the way, here I go. Then they shut the door. Then they're behind the door. They're behind the walls. Mom can't see them. Now in the room, this is how they're making their bed. You say, well, now, Brother Rye, they're making their bed. But how are they doing it? There's something missing in this scene. Would you look carefully at the scene? Is it a brain? Possibly, but that's not what's missing. It's possibly. But you know what's missing? First word in verse 2, honor. That's not obedience because it's not honor. This is an honor when a young person sits with their peers and uses their tongue to cut down their parents. That's not honor. This is an honor when a girl listens to a boyfriend, so-called boyfriend, before mom and dad. That's not honor. That's disobedience because it's dishonor. And I go on and on like that. And there are many young people like this. If you've got a rebel in your home, you know what I'm talking about. It's not fun to have a rebel. You see, I worked with many, many young people. And I had a lot of rebellious young people. I had a lot of very good young people. But I had some rebels. And when you got a hold of a rebel, you got a problem. And one of the best things that can happen to a rebel is when they see early, when they're a teenager. Now, it doesn't matter when they see it. If it's older, fine. But it's much better if they see it when they're young. Hey, I'm not right. I got to quit pretending I'm right. How can I be right with the Lord if I'm not right with my mom and dad? Well, I tell you, you can't be. And thank God some of those young people got it. They get it right. Like a young lady I'm thinking about right now. She got right. It's not enough to get it right. You know what we need to do with our young people? We need to get them involved for Jesus Christ. They need to learn to get on the offense for the Lord. They need to know how to get involved and serve the Lord. I take you to Daytona Beach, Florida. Here stands a girl, skinny little girl, 9th grade. I believe she was 14, 15 years old. And she was a rebel. But she got right with the Lord. And her daddy, who was a pastor, by the way, wanted to get her involved in something that could really help her spiritually. And she came to Daytona. And I'll tell you, when she came to Daytona, she got on fire. And here's the same girl that rebelled against her daddy, rebelled against her mother, gave them a hard time, terrible time. But now she's living for the Lord. Now she's at Daytona Beach, Florida, with a Bible in her hand. And she's standing witnessing to 4 great big muscle-bound fellows, big thick necks. The chaperone who told me about this scene saw the whole thing. And she was witnessing to them. They were so big she had to get up on her tiptoes and show them out of the Bible how to be saved. He just knew they were football players. They had to be. She goes through the plan of salvation with them. She invites all 4 of them to trust Christ. He said, brother, I was in earshot. I could hear the whole thing. When they bowed their heads, she led them all in a prayer. And out loud, they prayed and called upon the name of the Lord. When she got finished leading them to the Lord, the first thing we do is we give them the assurance of their salvation right out of the Bible. Don't just lead them to Christ. We give them the assurance, then we take their names and addresses. Well, she did that. And then she turned immediately and left and went to someone else to witness to him. When she did that, they were walking away, but the chaperone went over to those 4 guys. Hey, I just want to talk to you. I want to find out what just happened to you. One of the guys, the spokesman, we just got saved. Very big smile on his, we just got saved. Fellas, are you glad you got saved? Yes. Where do you go to college? Where do you play football? He thought they'd say Michigan, Notre Dame, somewhere like that. Oh, we're not football players. He said, we're United States Marines. And we just got back from the war in the Gulf. I thought, man, God kept those 4 Marines safe through that war, brought them back to a beach where a former rebel, now right with the Lord, serving Christ, could take her Bible and point all of them to Jesus Christ. That's what we're talking about. Young people don't have to be a rebel, but it'll sure ruin a home. Then the last thing is this, is bitterness. When bitterness is in hearts, it's a destroyer of the home. And there's not one of us in this room that can afford to have bitterness in our heart. And you know, here's the sad thing. There are many Christians that are bitter. And they're mad. Some people are still mad about things that happened 20, 25 years ago to them. And I'm going to tell you something. When I got treated like, I didn't even tell you, I just told you a pinch of what my dad did. I haven't told you what my brothers did to me after I got saved, how they treated me, how my entire family treated me. I wasn't just kicked out of the home, brother. I was treated terrible. And I look back at it now. I didn't know it back then because I was such a young Christian, but I know now as I look back, bitterness was trying to get a root in my heart. And this happens to a lot of people who are saved. Something happens to them. Somebody says something to them. It's negative. It's hurtful. Maybe it comes back through somebody else. Maybe it's sent right personally to them. And boy, it hurts. And it does hurt. But the worst thing any of us can do is get any bitterness at all. Even an ounce of bitterness in the heart is too much. Because what happens to bitterness, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 is very clear about this. It grows. It starts with a root. And then it grows, and pretty soon it's too much. And it overwhelms a person, even a Christian. And it can ruin their life. And I didn't know this back then, but now looking back, and I have thought about this many times since, that I could realize looking back, hey, you know, I was getting a root of bitterness. Like the day I was walking down the main street of my hometown, my brother, my second oldest brother, he has 2 sons that are my nephews. They're both Catholic priests. He's very religious. He walked right up to me and spit in my face. And I'll tell you, I could have gotten very angry and very bitter. I was confused because I was such a new Christian. But I can remember going back to the little apartment I was living in, going into that apartment and getting my Bible. See, when we get discouraged and down, we need to go to our Bible. And I was discouraged that day. And you know, God taught me one of the best lessons you could ever learn. I just happened to be reading, interesting, in Psalm 27. That was my devotion. And I came to verse 10. And when thy father and thy mother forsake thee, then the Lord will take you up. And this is what God taught me that day. It doesn't matter who forsakes you, who hurts you, how they hurt you, how deep it is, the wound that is. Underneath all those things are the everlasting arms of the Lord Jesus. Amen. And he'll never leave us. Amen. And he'll never forsake us. We've got him on our side. We're going to have to stop there. On our side. We're going to have to stop there. On our side. We're going to have to stop there. On our side. We're going to have to stop there. On our side. We're going to have to stop there. On our side. We're going to have to